I invite you to close your eyes if it's comfortable for you to do so, and to take a deep breath and let it go. And focusing on our breathing, we breathe in and breathe out. We let the chair support us, reminded that the infinite resources of God are supporting us always. We can lean into that support and trust. Life has a way of bringing challenges and problems to our doorstep from time to time, large or small. And we may find ourselves inclined to look outward to the world for the solution. Asking for opinions, looking for information. And while that information might have utility for us, it's important for us to remember to turn within to that one presence and power, that power of spirit, that life and light of spirit. It is indeed an infinite resource. At all times. The truth is that we are spiritual beings, created in the image and likeness of God. We are expressions of the light and life of spirit, one with spirit. We have access to whatever divine love, divine ideas, divine wisdom we may need. And so we take time, quiet time to ask for the blessing, time to focus on the presence and the power, the light of spirit, to remember the truth that we are spiritual beings. God, I am open and receptive to the unfolding good of your Spirit in this life, in my life. I know I am guided and supported every step of the way. we can take this opportunity to pray for others. If there is a person or people that come to mind, we hold them in the light. And rather than focusing on the issue or the challenge that they may be dealing with, we see them as the spiritual being that they truly are. Knowing for them that they are guided, that they are blessed, that they have access to the infinite resources of spirit. We see them moving forward safely and successfully, confidently. God, we are grateful for the gift of this life. For your presence, for the reminder that we are spiritual beings. We are grateful for this day. And may we be open and receptive this day for a deeper experience of your light, your love. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Amen. Well, good morning, everyone. Feels good to be here. It's been quite a while. Anybody want to stretch? I like to stretch on Sunday mornings. Maybe we won't turn back into our original shape when we're done. We'll see. Problems, challenges. It does seem that life presents us with them from time to time. Large and small, maybe they come in bunches. We get to deal with them. Finances, relationships, work, health, whatever. The possibilities are legion, but the solution is one. So today I'm going to talk about problems and challenges. I remember when I seemed to have a work problem, a financial problem, and a health problem all rolled into one. It was a long time ago. Before I was even in Unity, I was teaching meditation at the time, transcendental meditation, and it was a real shoestring lifestyle, let me tell you. And I was looking for something that would be a little more stable. It might actually have a paycheck associated with it. And so I was calling different facilities. I called the meditation center that was in Saboba Springs, California, and I asked them if they might have work for me. Do you guys have a job? I'll wash dishes. I'm not whatever. And they said, well, our bookkeeper quit. And I said, perfect, that's me. When do you want me there? I'll be there. I can do this. I have a college education. I can handle this. And so they agreed, and I got in my car, and I drove there, and it was a beautiful place. It was an old hot springs. I don't know if any of you might have conceivably been there, but I got there, and I quickly realized three things. One was that the previous bookkeeper had left 2 months prior. And the second thing I learned was that I think she might have left even before that in terms of her head, because the place was a shambles. The office was covered with invoices, unopened mail, receipts, bills, all kinds of stuff. And the third thing that I realized was I was clueless. I had no idea what I was doing. I had been to college, but I was an English major, not a bookkeeping major. And so I dug in and I tried to figure it out, and I spent many hours in that office trying to figure out what I was supposed to do and trying to do it. And I actually was getting headaches here at a meditation center trying to work it out, and I was not making a lot of progress. Well, you know, there's an old saw that says that one way to deal with a problem is to get a bigger problem. So in this case, what I did was I got an infection in my hand. I guess I had cut my hand, and it turned, I hadn't taken good enough care of it. I don't know. But the fact of the matter was that I was so broke that I did not have the money to go to a doctor. And so clearly I must have prayed about it, because between the universe and the state of California, I was able to go see a doctor, and he cleaned things up and gave me some antibiotics, and it's resolved that part of things. Now, as far as the job was concerned, I had an aha. I quit. And it was clearly divine guidance, because I was so far over my head, I couldn't see any daylight. Now, when I got started in Unity, I learned that I didn't have problems. People in Unity didn't have problems, they had challenges. Now, I was a little skeptical of this shift in terminology. It seemed like, in a way, we were taking one word and swapping it for another word, which sounded nicer and maybe put a little positive spin on things, which is not a bad thing. Because our attitude, our perspective counts for everything when we're dealing with a situation. But I realized in time that a problem, what seems to be a problem, is actually can be something much different. There is a very real distinction between a problem and a challenge. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit here today. And I also learned that just simply swapping a word was not the solution if you didn't change your thinking to go along with it. Well, back in the olden days, and I mean even before my olden days, if you were traveling around and you went to a city, and, you know, in those days they used to have walls around cities, and they had gates, and they had a gatekeeper. And if you came to the gate and you wanted to get in, you would be challenged. They would say, "Who goes there?" Or maybe they would just say, "Who are you?" But I kind of like, "Who goes there?" And you had to come up with the right answer if you were going to get any further. Now, it was just really an identity question. Who are you? And what occurred to me over time is that when we encounter a problem in life, if we are willing to see it, mostly it really is a challenge. It's life saying to us, "Who are you? Who are you?" Now, we might answer, well, I don't, you know, I mean, I have a Facebook account, I have a credit card, I don't really know the situation, I don't see where I'm at fault in this. Somebody's to blame, and I'd like to know who is to blame. Things have been against me lately, and on and on and on. You know, sometimes our stories get pretty involved. Or we might answer, I am a spiritual being. I am eternal. I am an expression of light and life. I am learning and I am growing, and I know there is a blessing in this situation somewhere. Or as it's sometimes put, I know there's a pony in here somewhere. It's a question of identification. Am I this body and this ego, or am I truly something more? So what do we mean when we say that I'm a spiritual being? Well, as a human being, we tend to put the emphasis on the human side and figure that we are this physical body. We look in the mirror, sometimes reluctantly as the years go by. But when we look in that mirror, it's not only a question of we are, what we see is what we get, it's what we see is who we are. Isn't that the case? That's who I am. Well, what's really the case here is that is a case of mistaken identity. What is closer to the truth is that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. We are spiritual beings having a human, earthly experience. And this body is really an earth suit that serves us temporarily, but someday we're going to hang it up and move on. And when we say I am, this is a new thought in unity. This I am concept is an important one. When we say I am, we are linking ourselves to whatever comes next. And if I say I am sick and tired, well, what I'm doing is linking myself, tying myself to this body identity in a not positive way. But if I say I am spirit, then we are linking ourselves to that which is eternal, whole, and complete. And when we recognize oneself as a spiritual being, then we are aligning ourselves with the movement of spirit, and the universe can get behind us and out in front of us and make many things possible, open doors that we thought were closed. I'm going to invite you to join me in an affirmation. And it goes simply like this. I am a spiritual being. I am a spiritual being. Together, I am a spiritual being. Let's do that one more time. I am a spiritual being. And that's the truth. Eckhart Tolle said that we have two purposes in life here on this earth, an outer purpose and an inner purpose. And the outer purpose is unique to each individual, and it has to do with the work we do, the roles we play, the relationships we develop, and on and on. The inner purpose is the same for everybody. And that inner purpose is to realize more fully the true identity of who we are as a spiritual being. It doesn't have to do with how much power or stuff we acquire or accumulate. And it is not about how easy and comfortable our life is. And so when something shows up that isn't easy or comfortable, and that's what problems often are, something that isn't easy and comfortable, it doesn't necessarily mean that we goofed up or that somebody else goofed up for that matter. It may mean that it is an opportunity for us to grow in our awareness of the truth of our being. And if it is a problem, then it isn't likely to take us deeper. But if it is a challenge, then the opportunity is there. Together, I am a spiritual being. Now, I do believe that we can minimize the hard and uncomfortable and maximize the fun and the abundant by the choices that we make. Life is for living, and it's for living joyfully. But I do believe that joyful living has its foundation in a growing awareness of our spiritual nature. So, it isn't necessarily the easiest path to take if we accept the challenge. Sometimes the challenge isn't the easiest thing to do, but it may be exactly what we need in order to get where we belong. Now, you've probably heard the story of the man who was watching the little chick breaking its way out of its eggshell And it would peck a little hole, and then it would rest, and then it would peck a little, and it would rest. And so finally, out of compassion, the man just broke open the shell and let the bird out. But the problem was that the bird did not thrive and didn't grow into a strong adulthood, because evidently there was something in that process that was essential to its full development. And it seems to me that unfortunately we see in the news stories about the children of the rich and famous whose parents made it too easy and comfortable for them, and it was well-meaning, but the results were unfortunate. Now, in the Bible, there are a number of stories of people who went through the experience of slavery or being imprisoned or in jail as part of their road to realization. And when we look at the Bible stories from the perspective of the fact that they are representing something meaningful in terms of our own inner life, we are reminded that it is our state of mind that often is the thing that seems to lock us up or put us in chains. And sometimes it's evidently that time in the slammer that gets us actually back on the right track. One of these is the story of Joseph. Joseph is, I think, an interesting story. I think Richard might have talked about him recently. Joseph was the youngest of 12 boys, and he was spoiled. His father loved him the best and made it clear, didn't make any bones about it, and gave him lots of gifts, including the coat of many colors that we hear about. He had it easy and comfortable. Now, the Bible says that the Lord was with him, and that he clearly had a gift when it came to dreams. But evidently in his immaturity and his kind of ego inflation, he lorded it over his brothers, and they hated him and thought he was a brat, basically, and they decided at some point they were going to get rid of him. So they kidnapped him and they threw him in a pit, and apparently the original idea was maybe they were going to kill him, but they decided that, well, we can't really do that. He's our brother after all. So they sold him into slavery. There was a caravan that was on its way to Egypt, and they sold him as a slave and to get rid of him. And so when he got to Egypt, he was bought by a man named Potiphar, who was some kind of an official in the Egyptian hierarchy. And Potiphar gave him some things to do, and as it turned out, everything Joseph did worked out great. He was competent and capable, and everything he touched seemed to just kind of work out abundantly. So Potiphar gave him more and more to do, and pretty soon he was just kind of running the whole household. Well, as sometimes happens, even though things were going swimmingly, it seemed things took a turn, and as they do, even in the Bible. And what happened was that Potiphar's wife took a shine to Joseph, and he rejected her advances, and she took it hard, and she made some accusations that ended up putting him in prison. So here he was. He had been a slave. Now he was a prisoner. He was a Jewish boy in an Egyptian jail back a few thousand years ago. It was not a great situation for him to be in, but the Lord was with him. And what ended up happening was that he interpreted some dreams. And to make a long story maybe a little shorter, it was clear he got some notoriety as a great interpreter of dreams. And when the Pharaoh had a dream that was nobody else could seem to get a grip on, they brought in Joseph to the picture, and he interpreted these dreams. They had to do with 7 fat cows, 7 lean cows. Maybe you remember the story. It was about the fact that there was going to be a time of plenty, and then there was going to be a time of famine for the nation of Egypt. And so he interpreted this, and it was clear that what they had to do was prepare in the first 7 years for the following 7 years. And I guess he got a chance to really run that show and build granaries and store the food. And so when the famine did come, they had the food to feed people. And actually, not only Egyptians, but they had people coming from around the region to get some food. And among them were his brothers. They showed up one day looking for food, and he was apparently kind of managing things. I kind of imagine him in a big room, with a big chair and a big desk. And they didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. And it's kind of an involved story. He made them jump through some hoops, but eventually they were reconciled, and he said to them, "You may have meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. You may have meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." So what does it mean, really? Did God make him a slave? No, his brothers did that. But Joseph knew he was beloved by his earthly father. But evidently, he needed this challenge. He needed to move through this challenge spiritually in order to realize that he was a beloved child of God. Now, one could say that he fulfilled his outer purpose by really developing these capabilities and being of service, and he was able to make sure that the nation of Egypt was fed, plus lots of other people, including his own family. But I believe that the only reason he could fulfill that outer purpose was because he was fulfilling the inner purpose, his inner purpose of realizing more deeply and more profoundly who he was, that he was a spiritual being, that he could draw upon the resources of spirit, that he was created in the image of God and likeness of God, and he could draw from that love and light and divine wisdom that was available to him as a child of God. And maybe he was a good bookkeeper too, I don't know. He rose above his old self-concept and gained a deep insight into his spiritual identity. Together, I am a spiritual being. I remember going to a program that was led by Alan Cohen, and Alan, he's written like 30 books, and they're mostly about New Thought and the Course in Miracles. And in this program, he said something that stuck with me all this time, and I found very meaningful. And it was simply this. He said, every challenge, he put it this way. He said, every problem that comes to us comes holding a blessing behind its back, a gift behind its back. But we have to ask for the gift. Otherwise, we just get the problem. Otherwise, we just get the problem. Now, asking for the blessing doesn't necessarily mean that the problem or the challenge will go away, but it does mean that we are looking beyond the appearances of the problem to the presence of Spirit, which is always here, always one with us, and through that activity of Spirit, all things are possible. Now, I don't know about you, but some of the most impressive people I've known are people who have faced daunting challenges in this life, and I've had the privilege to know a few of them. And rather than being defeated by those challenges or deflated or shrinking from life, they went deeper and built a spiritual foundation for their lives through their response to the challenges that they experienced. They answered the challenge with an answer that enabled them to go forward. Now, one of these people was a person that I would call a friend, and some of you may have known him. He broke his neck in a construction accident at the age of 22. It was just a couple of weeks after his honeymoon. He was a quadriplegic, and he ended up spending 50-plus years in a wheelchair. Now, he had a high school education. His wife left him within a year or so. And it started out really rough. I mean, could you imagine? I don't think we could imagine what it was like for him. A young man, the age of 22, who now could not move his body from the neck down. But after about 6 years of being angry, he turned it around. And I believe that he found something within himself. He found a depth within himself that enabled him to move forward successfully. He got his doctorate in psychology. He became a professor and a counselor, and he helped and inspired many people. And he became an accomplished painter. He found something within himself that enabled him to go forward, and I suspect that his life was all about answering that challenge, maybe on a daily basis. And I must say that if you knew Dave, you'd know that it occurred to me while I was thinking about this that it was a sense of humor that also contributed towards his ability to move through this successfully. He had a wonderful and sometimes wicked sense of humor that really helped him through a lot of things, I'm sure. So let's look at some of the steps for dealing with problems. Number one, I would say, is decide. Decide, is this a problem or is this a challenge for me? We get to decide. The word problem has its origin in a Greek word that means something thrown forward, which is really odd, I think, but that's it. It comes from a Greek word meaning something thrown forward. But what that brings to mind for me is the idea of a problem being something that we're virtually throwing forward into our own path that we're going to have to somehow then deal with. Webster, if you look up the definition in the dictionary of the word problem, the first definition was a mathematical one. But the second one goes like this, quote, an intricate, unsettled question, a source of perplexity, vexation, or distress. I think it's a wonderful phrase. I love it. A source of perplexity, vexation, or distress. And so it seems to me that if you put these two together, it's kind of like if we perceive and respond as if this is a problem, then in a sense, are we throwing in our path a source of vexation and distress that we're going to have to deal with? But on the other hand, if it is a challenge that we're dealing with, then isn't it, in a sense, life asking us, who are you? Who are you? Together? I am a spiritual being. Well, secondly, I'd say consider the energy of the situation. There was a good book written by Wayne Dyer called There's a Spiritual Solution for Every Problem. And the premise of this book, as I see it, and I think it was pretty much encapsulated in an expression that was made by Albert Einstein. And what he said was that no problem is solved at the level of thinking that created it. No problem is solved at the level of thinking that created it. Well, I guess I would like to approach this from a thinking of it in a vibrational way, an energy way, because after all, on some level, we are energy beings and we are generating an energy field. I think basically through our thoughts and feelings, we're generating an energy field that has a lot to do with what we're attracting into our lives and what we're resonating with. Anyway, if a challenge shows up and it's vibrating, say, at something like this level, and what it seems like Einstein is saying is that if we try to address it at the same level, and frankly, that's something that we have a tendency to do as human beings, we're not likely to make much headway. It's not going to get resolved at that level. And if we go lower and we get stuck in fear or anger or resentment, we're certainly not going to make a whole lot of progress there. But if we can raise our vibration, if we can raise the energy level of our being as a spiritual being, then we can rise above the vibration of this problem, and then we are looking down at it, and from there, it looks entirely different. So number 3, how do we raise our vibration? Well, it isn't for nothing that Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore in Unity talked about prayer and meditation for, they've been doing, now they weren't talking for over 100 years, but Unity has been talking about it for over 100 years. Because prayer and meditation are powerful means, vehicles for us to raise our consciousness, raise our vibration, and move into a perspective where we are able to see more clearly the truth of who we are as a spiritual being and draw on those spiritual resources that are available to us. And it would seem that oftentimes the problem that we've been facing sort of loses a lot of its substantiality, or a lot of its grip on us as we look at it from a higher place. And Eric Butterworth, a Unity teacher, said, prayer can be thought of as the contemplation of the facts from the highest point of view. It's one way to think about prayer. Now, Emmett Fox, he addressed it with what he called the golden key. He said, don't think about the problem, think about God. Now, we're not talking about thinking about God as some guy up on a throne in the sky, but we're thinking about God as spirit, God as light, God as love and life, God as the wonder of the cosmos, God as the miracle of a newborn child, God as the love that can transform situations. And I think you would find, if you follow this advice of Fox's, that it begins to open up, and you start thinking about God in creative ways, subtler ways. It's endless. You begin to open up all kinds of experiences of how God manifests in life. Fourthly, if you don't want the problem, then I would suggest you choose what you do want. When I was active in ministry, sometimes people would come to me for spiritual counseling, and they'd come with problems that were, really difficult. And sometimes they would embark on a painful dissertation, and lengthy one, about everything that was going wrong, the problem. And sometimes, if it seemed like the right thing to do, I would suggest to them that, what is it that you would like to see instead? Because it seemed to me that, we know as truth students that what we focus on expands. And if we're totally wrapped up in the problem, the issue, then it doesn't give us a chance to really focus on what we do want. And if we can shift from focusing strictly on what we don't want to what it is that we do want, then it seems to me that it was often a step in the right direction for people who wanted to be able to find a solution. Is there stuff in our lives and in our world that we could happily live without? Well, yes. I can only speak from my point of view and say yes. There is that which I could happily live without, but it's here. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "This time, like all times, is a very good one if we but know what to do with it." If we but know what to do with it. What do we do with it? Are we willing to challenge ourselves, to accept the challenge, to respond from the highest truth within us? Are we willing to declare a truth that I am a spiritual being? I invite you to join with me as we take this into prayer for a moment. I am a spiritual being. I am a spiritual being. As we take the opportunity to look more deeply within, we can more fully realize this truth. And be reminded that we do indeed have access to the infinite, unlimited resources of Spirit because we are one with Spirit. as we focus on this truth. We are liberated from many of the limitations and confinements that may have seemed to hold us back in the past. We can find the doors open that had seemed to be closed. But the problem or the challenge or the issue that we face can lose some of its grip, some of its solidity, as we are reminded that we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe that is governed by spiritual law. And that we can choose to see whatever the problem, however scary it might look, choose to see that it is a challenge and that behind it lies a blessing. We ask for the blessing. We are open and receptive. And we say, thank you, God. Amen.